We good? Okay. All right, stretch time is now officially over. Well, all right, guys. Here we go. Well, anyway, thank you, Nora, and I appreciate. Actually, it's just a real pleasure to be invited here to speak today. I've really been a member of the Hardy Plant Society for several years, but living in Harrisburg, I've been working 50 to 60 hours a week. It's just been very difficult to really kind of interact. Sometimes I've gone to a couple events, but it's just been a little bit of a struggle. But my career is sort of winding down. I am actually a family physician. And so, I'm hoping that to retire in September and then be able to do more and more things. So as I wound down a little bit of my career, I became a master gardener so I could give back. I really enjoy doing a lot of photography. I've been gardening for about 35 years or so. And I just love, as all of you do, just being out in the space. It's really been my savior. Working long hours, it was always critical. I always felt bad in my family. The first thing I would have to say is, you've got to give me 30 minutes. I can't take any questions. I was like to my family, it's like, you guys just give me 30 minutes. And I just kind of disappear in the garden. And that really kind of re-energized me, and then I could re-engage. So that's kind of what kind of got me really kind of going into gardening. So anyway, so I'm going to invite you, at least to my garden, at least virtually here, as we're going to kind of do a little bit of a run-through tour of the garden. So this was kind of me when I started, gardening, and how many times did everybody kind of starts this way, right? I know all the nurseries right away say everybody shows up in May and then disappears the rest of the year. So of course, everyone's gardens look awesome in May and June when everything was blooming. They picked all these pretty things. And then because they didn't go back to garden centers and they didn't think that through, then their garden just gets kind of ho-hum the rest of the year. So I've kind of learned a lot from that. And I'm going to just talk about a few of the tips and some of the things I've learned. We're going to share lots of pictures. This really is kind of a tour, an overall tour. So I'm going to try to do some that'll be more bigger pictures, but we're going to talk a little bit about some of the principles. I'll highlight a few plants, but this isn't really like a plant in depth of an individual plant. So we're really going to talk about how to pull off this 4-season garden thing. So this is just to orient you to my house. So I'm actually just in a suburban neighborhood. I'm only on 1/3 of an acre. The home was built, we had it built in 1996. So there was no trees or plants anywhere on the site, just absolutely nothing. Of course, as always, the builders stripped off all the topsoil, as they always lovely do. And so we get to start. So I got to start with kind of nothing, which was kind of fun. I took that as a big challenge. So the first thing I needed to do was plant some trees. So you can see the trees around the house. And those were the ones I planted back in 1996. I wanted to get that going. They kind of formed like a U shape around the house. The house faces north, and I wanted to protect the south side a little bit of the house. That's where we spend a lot of our time, kitchen, family room, our patios back there. So I wanted a little more shade back there. So it kind of defined the garden right away, that was going to be the shady side and the north was going to be the sunny side. I've done all the work myself, so for better or worse. So anyway, as you see the rest of the pictures, if you hate them, okay, you can blame me. I just was a self-taught. I love going to gardens. I love reading tons of information. That's just kind of what I always do. And so I have a lot of fun learning a lot about gardening over the years. I also love photography. So you'll see through some of my pictures, but we'll kind of go through. The first lesson I quickly learned, though, was you always have to respect your spouse's wish. So I learned that the hard way a little bit, but then I finally got okay, I got that pass. The blessing for me is my wife really doesn't like to garden at all. So that kind of left me pretty free rein to do whatever I wanted. And she's been very patient as I've gone through various iterations of gardening styles. But she's been patient, but she had one kind of rule, and that rule was nothing in the front above the height of that railing of the porch. So I learned the hard way. So anyway, I found that, okay, so that was really critical to her, and she was letting me do anything else I wanted. So I was like, okay, I've got to go. So that line represents, now I was able to cheat a little bit over time, and I've kind of negotiated that the garage, which is to the right, where the windows are on over to the right of that picture, that I don't officially count as the house. So I was able to kind of creep up a little bit over there. And then, of course, she actually appreciated the fairly mature Pinus parviflora that's on the left side, up against our porch. We have this really nice wraparound porch, and she likes the privacy. She was good with that. But everything else, I've learned I've had to cut down trees. I've had to cut things down, but now I'm really good at trying to maintain that red line rule there. So that's important. This is the only slide that doesn't have pictures, so I'm just going to quickly run through. But and you guys all know this, so I'm not going to focus. But the most important thing when we start thinking of 4-season garden, obviously get the structure down, get those trees in, the hardscape, get the things that are hard to move in. But then I found that the next most important thing is think of the views and how you see your garden. That was the most important thing, and how you see it with each season, because that's totally different. In the winter, I'm seeing my garden a lot when I drive in and out of the garage. I see that section, or I'm in our family room, or where we eat our meals, and that's where I'm viewing. So I make sure that I focused a lot on what do those views look like from those spots in the house, because that's how I view the garden. Different seasons were more on the patio, other seasons were more on the porch. So I try to make sure that each season I focused to make sure I had really good kind of a wow effect where I'm actually viewing the garden, and that helped. The next thing was to get down matrix plantings, whether you call them matrix or ground covers, but get the ground covered. We need those plants to tie things in. I don't want to put mulch down. When you're starting a garden, obviously you start, and I remember the days when I was dumping, I don't know, 26, 30 yards of mulch on my property as I was just trying to get things going. Now I don't mulch at all. So that's great. So that's one job off my list. And I don't have to do that because I now have the plantings that are my living mulch. So that works out great. So get those down. And then I always kept thinking, foliage before flowers, I quickly learned that's going to carry the day. Focus on texture and contrasts. And then you throw in the seasonal wow plants. And they can come and go. And sometimes a seasonal wow plant only makes it a few years because it didn't wow me as much as I thought it should. So it's going because, that's what compost is for. And then build your vignettes around those wow moments. So, I want to have that at any time in my garden, any day, if someone was to walk around, there's something that should really catch somebody's eye. And they should go, wow, I want to catch. And then I'll build a vignette around that. And that's kind of how I've kind of worked this through. And then I found that I take a lot of photos and then make the appropriate edits when I see that it doesn't work in the picture. So that's been how I've kind of approached this. So now we're going to kind of run with this. I'm doing it by seasons rather than months, because if I did it by months, I realized I'd probably talk for 3 hours. Even at seasons, this is going to be a push. So I'm going to try to move through this because it's hard doing this in an hour and do the whole garden. So I'm going to do the best I can. But so I'm going to start with winter. I really love winter. It's a great time for that rest and reflection. And it's just a perfect time. I put that quote from Andrew Wyeth, and it's just great because you can see the structure, and it also gives you that anticipation of what's to come. And I love that. So everything, as you know, with any good garden, as you do it, you want to certainly look at your views. You want to control your views. That makes the garden look bigger, and you want to control the depth. So my garden will always look bigger, and you'll see through a lot of the types of things where I do the views. This is the view I get from my, this is actually where I'd be sitting in where I eat our meals. The back of our house has a little bit, it bumps out. We have like a breakfast nook, but that's kind of where we actually eat. And so it bumps out. And so we have this, it bumps away from the house. So it gives me these nice views, which you can't see is that's my shed there that's in the picture. But you can't see then my neighbor's house, which is actually not very far from there. And I take advantage of the fact that when I look from that table, I'm looking between all the backyards, and it gives this impression that there's a great deal of depth, even though there's really not as much. I also like that. I think this shows the framework. When I see something like that, I like the way this kind of framed. I like the way the deciduous trees kind of arch. So it certainly gives you that kind of a bit of a pleasure there. So it's helpful to evaluate that structure. Here's a picture of my driveway. This is me pulling into the driveway. My garage is to the left. So this is the view I get in the winter. And that's what I see. What you don't see because of the conifers is I've shielded out two homes that are behind that you would. And so the view is between all the other yards between the homes. And so again, making it look like my yard is a lot deeper than it actually is. So that often helps again, as we start doing some of this. I'm back sitting and eating in my breakfast area. And again, looking out now to the east. And I've got that nice Acer rubrum, so it's wonderful. I mean, deciduous trees are gorgeous, obviously, in the winter. It's great to have a specimen to kind of look. And you can see, again, there's the way that our house is sit, because this is the view that I get, and you can't really see the homes that are both to the right and to the left. And it makes it look like there's a lot of depth. So this has been kind of a good way to kind of get that four-season look. So this is the east side of the house. The porch is on the left when you saw that wraparound porch. And you can see I'm using a lot of conifers. I'm using perennials that I don't cut down. I've got, again, I use everything is rounded on my property. I use a lot of curves. And you can still see some of the layering, even though that the snow is kind of covering a bunch of it. You know, this is to remind, so, you know, for me, this cryptomeria really shines in the winter months. That's Black Dragon, and that's just a gorgeous tree. It's also a focal point in one of the big views that I have in my property. But in the winter, it really shines with the snow on it. And the other pictures was just to remind how important it is that we have not just wild plants, but that we also attract wildlife. And create habitat, because that's what gets us through the winter. It makes it so much more fun. It's great when we've got birds constantly in the property. I mean, that just, I get thrilled over seeing the wildlife in the property in the winter. I mean, all year round, but especially getting me through the winter. You know, using great bark, critical for the winter months. These two trees are situated right outside our family room. So I get to actually, again, that's where I'm spending my time in the winter. I want to see this. So I've got Acer griseum on the left, the paper bark maple, and Pinus spongiana on the right, which is the lace bark pine. I mean, both gorgeous, gorgeous barks. And again, they're both very visible from the rooms that we spend time in the winter months. This is, for me, I've just stepped out the front walk and I'm looking now to the west. And you can see that it's obviously lower here because of the red line rule that I mentioned. So we've got lower plantings here, but you can see I'm keeping a lot of stems up to try to create habitat. I keep a lot of frost resistant containers. Many of my containers are planted with either shrubs or trees, so they stay out. So I try to keep things that I can maintain in containers to give that also some additional interest. Hackanachoa on the bottom is just gorgeous. You know, it's nice also to have a few ornaments that look good in the winter. I love, you know, brown is a lovely color, and I love the Hackanachoa grass in the winter months. And like I said, it's fun to have a few fun ornaments scattered about. This is right in front of our porch in the winter, and it's just, again, just showing a variety of textures, whether it be the deciduous Weigela that's on the left, rhododendron, the cephalotaxis, or that Pinus parviflora. It creates some additional textures. And then peeling bark on different shrubs. We've got 9 bark on the left and the hydrangea crucifolia, oak leaf hydrangea on the right, which are critical. This is me standing on the driveway looking across to the east. of our house. So the garage is right there to the right. And again, you can just see my, what I try to do is I've got a very mixed, all my borders are very mixed. So this is the time for conifers to shine, but I do leave up a lot of the herbaceous material, and have some other woody shrubs up there too. This also is in my front yard. I like this look. Some people may not like to have a lot of stems, but to me, it just brings in, I just keep thinking of habitat. And this is actually part of my front yard that I'm actually standing on the sidewalk. So people are walking past. So this is kind of, but I really spend a lot of time along the sidewalk. I make sure it looks very neat and taken care of. And then as we step back, even just a few feet, we start to get what looks a little bit wilder, but it's still very managed and it looks very managed. So, even though it's in my front yard, I think people, again, I get lots of good compliments and not people being turned off by that. I also get excited to see more and more people starting to mimic some of this. So that's also great. Then it's great to have, accent plants, right? We talked about having those wow plants in there. So having the red twig dogwood, Corniceraceae, that one's Arctic fire on the upper right, and the winterberry. That's one of the dwarfs. That's berry poppins. Gets about 3 to 4 feet. Berries pretty heavily, so I've had pretty good success with that. So one of them is right near the driveway, so I get to actually see that red color as I'm coming in. The other one is along the sidewalk that, as we're walking around. So again, everybody gets to kind of, see some of that color. Now in late February, again, that's just kind of that view across the house. And you can see the mixed borders are still holding up pretty well, even in February. Then, now we start to get, we're now at the end of February, beginning of March. And I rely on 3 bulbs to get me into that super excitement. So as we go, so obviously snowdrops are one. I love having them around. I plant them more along walkways because obviously they're a lot more delicate and you're not going to see them from far. So I keep thinking, okay, anywhere I walk. So the walk from our front door is we're going to go out to pick up the mail, or along the driveway, or along our patio, or again, under the window of our family room. So I'm putting in places that we can see. So these are going to be kind of close up. And I love having the snowdrops around. They're also great, obviously, when we start to see the bees emerging, I'm often seeing some of the bees right away getting at least some early nectar with the snowdrops. I also love Aranthus, winter aconite, which is just fabulous. Now these I'll plant further away from the house because, who doesn't love that yellow? It's in the buttercup family. It's gorgeous. It just brightens your spirits, but I can see it from anywhere in the garden. So it's nice that, so those kind of go into, further away from the house because I can see those from a distance. That's another great plant to have scattered around. And then I just use Crocus thomasinianus. The Tommies, I've had no trouble with getting eaten down. I've had the best luck with. The other crocuses, the crocus bulbs, of course, have that nutty taste the squirrels love and the other critters love. But this, the Tommies, it's not as nutty. So I know this is the crocus least likely to get eaten. And I don't have trouble. I've had other ones eaten and they're just left alone. So this works out pretty well. So I have them scattered all about. And then to carry me through, of course, is hellebores, and that's going to finish for me out the rest of March. I've got maybe about 20 different hellebore cultivars scattered around the property, and of course, gives us that March and April beautiful color in the garden. I also like to use the hellebores as a ground cover. Because they are a great ground cover. They don't get, nothing, everything leaves them alone. So they're incredibly deer resistant, and I'll use them, and they look great through the whole winter months. So I use them a lot as ground covers. So I'll let the clumps expand. I'll let some babies form around them. And I don't, over time, because there's enough cultivars here, eventually I get enough open pollination of some of the ones that are fertile, and the babies don't look as good as the parents, obviously, because now that we've got all these mixes. But a lot of times they still look good, especially when they're scattered in through different garden beds. And like I said, I'm using it more for the foliage to have that ground cover effect. So it's a wonderful ground cover to have. So as we move to spring, of course, spring to me means daffodils, so which is great. This is ice follies that's there, which I find it's just one of the prettiest combinations. I love the cup on it. I love that ruffled cup. It's got a really strong cup with that nice white. That's one of my favorite daffodils. I always make sure I'm underplanting daffodils. So as you can see, I've got some Angelina sedum underneath this one. I'll use John Creech sedum as another really great ground cover sedum. And then I'll use a lot of the minor bulbs like grape hyacinths, or another great one to underplant, and I don't have it is Anemone blanda, the Grecian windflower. I mean, that's another great one to put under your daffodils and tulips because it blooms at the same time. This foliage will all go away. So you've got all this nice ferny foliage, and these bulbs will be gone. I mean, there'll be no sign of the foliage by June. So it's great to have it in any place where you're going to have other perennials kind of pop up and take over that spot. So it's another wonderful bulb to kind of have in there. Back to just a few daffodils that I like. That's Thalia on the left. I love Thalia. It's, it has multiple blooms per stem. It's scented. And I just think Jetfire, which is the one on the right, I mean, that one just looks so fun. It just doesn't look like it's like the wind's blowing in its hair back. I think it's just because the name was so cool. It's like when you said Jetfire, it's like, yep, that's it. That's exactly what I was thinking. So, and I'm a sucker for buying sometimes if there's a name of a plant. I don't know if you guys are like that, but sometimes if they come up with a really cool name, I just have to buy it. It's like somebody was too inventive. It's worth my money. I should reward them for a good name. So, and then this was just to mention, so that's our family room windows that are in the background. So the light is really great. I get a lot of morning and evening light crossing across this. So this bed really kind of highlights really well, and it's right outside our window. So I try to put a lot of different things there so that we can look at those early on. Plus our patio is right to the right. So now we're getting to that point where we're starting to be outside a little bit more. This is kind of fun. So this is my pollinator garden. So these two pictures are the same garden, the same year. Okay, so this is one of the things so pollinator gardens are great places to put a lot of bulbs, because obviously the pollinator gardens are going to really look best in July and August and things. And so it's nice to have something in the beginning. So I planted it with a very early yellow daffodil. And that's what the top picture is. And so that picture is April 15th. And then on May 10th, the picture on the lower left, it turns so I've got a late blooming white daffodil with an orange thing. So this thing goes from yellow, and then all of a sudden those flowers start to fade, and then it all turns white. So it really extends it over this period of about 4 to 6 weeks, and it just makes that really look cool as the scene changes in this one particular bed. Cornus moss. So, when I think about plants that I really do also enjoy, I like this because not a lot of people plant it. This is the cornelian cherry. So it's native to Greece, but it has fruits. The birds love the fruits, so it's good for them. And they always take the fruits. Small tree blooms when forsythia does pretty early. Only blooms for about 2 weeks, but I do it because I like the fruits too, and the birds are always all over the tree when it fruits. So it's just it was just interesting to have. This is my little crevice garden thing. There's just a couple pictures here. This is to remind me. So I'm doing one of the Tuesday at 10. I think it's March 7th. And we're going to talk about the crevice garden. So I built this this year. I actually did another talk on building this. So we're going to be talking about it on the virtual Tuesday. But so I remember I was like, we had this really nasty, I had this plan, and I had already planned to do this talk. And it was getting closer, and the weather was terrible. And I was still not out there, and my crevice garden wasn't built. And I was now like 3 weeks before the talk. And I'm like, I've got to get out. And then it snowed again, and then it iced. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is going to kill me. So I was able to kind of squeak it in, got the talk going. But anyway, the crevice garden is really new for me. I planted it really in the front property in the front yard, because it's another way to have low plants. I kept, I told you the red line rule. So this is a great one. So I like, oh, I can have little plants here. And it'll give me some winter interest having the rocks. And I've created a number of berms, so it kind of slopes its way down. So it was like a perfect spot for a crevice garden. So I put this in. So the picture on the right is like just planted. And I really want to see if Lewissia, which I've always wanted to grow, if it will overwinter here. Not because of cold hardy, but Lewissia, as you know, just hates to have wet feet in the winter. So I'm going to see if I did a really good job or not, and can get this thing to get it to overwinter. But I put a few in, and then you'll see in the summer is the top picture on the left. That's that's the late spring picture. Sorry. So everything's in bloom. This will be obviously a spring garden because it's all going to be spring blooming rock garden plants, alpine plants. And then the lower picture was like a month ago. So it's kind of filling itself in a little bit. So we're going to have fun. I'm going to see how this goes. I've been having fun with it. I'm going to expand it a little bit next year. But it's fun. But we're going to have it. So anyway, if you're interested, March 7th on Tuesday at 10, we'll talk about how I put this thing together. Now my next pictures, we're outside, we're in spring. It's now so I've got, back to back, I'm going to show in April and May, and we're on the patio. So I wanted to surround myself with some fragrance. So I've got the Daphne, which is on the east side of the patio, and that will be my April bloom to really have that nice fragrance. And then I have Viburnum carlesii on the west side of the patio, which blooms a month later. So I basically get 2 months when we're spending a lot more time out in the patio, and we've got that beautiful fragrance kind of coming through. So this one is Spice Baby, which is actually the dwarf form. It only gets about 4 feet-ish tall or so. It's kind of slow growing. So that one is a pretty fun one to have. This picture I put in just to remind people about putting shrubs and trees and things in containers. So this pussy willow is in a container and has now gone through 7 years outside in the container. You can see how and what I do is I wait till it blooms and then I cut it back to like 12 inches. And then just let it, and by the end of the season, it's back up to about 4 feet or 4 to 5 feet tall. And that we just do this every year. So a lot of times I can get a lot of plants in containers for sometimes 8 to 10 years, keeping them outside. I don't have a greenhouse, so I don't have any place to store most of these. So they're going to stay outside. But so I try to find hardy enough plants, but I'll put anything in a container. And I feel if I can get 6 to 10 years from a plant in a container, well, that was worth whatever I spent for it. So it's like, that works. But this does great. It does super hard. I cut it down, it works really well. So it's been doing really well in the container. This is Amelanchier, serviceberry. I just love, this is my experience with the birds, because I love to battle with them for who gets the berries first, of course. And so I love serviceberry, and so do the birds, and they get them right before they ripen. And I just have not wanted to throw a cloth over it, but we have fun. And sometimes I'm in the tree and the birds are in the tree and they don't care that I'm there, and we're all just kind of battling to see who gets the berries out first. So, but I'm more than happy to share, but it's nice to have this little interactive experience with the birds. Species tulips. I love using species tulips. Okay, so these are the Lady Janes, Tulip clusiana. This clump has been there for about 15 years. So, that's the exception to tulips, right? Most tulips I treat as annuals. Species tulips will stay for almost ever. And these will slowly just kind of continue to naturalize. But I love them because they're small, they're dainty, they only get like 12 to 18 inches tall. And, they're like cute little peppermint sticks. I mean, the Lady Janes are so cute, and they only open if it's full sun. Otherwise, they're closed. If it's a cloudy day, they won't open. But when they open, you get that kind of really big. They open really wide out, and you get that white and maroon. So it's kind of cool. But I love the peppermint stick part. Actually, that's my favorite part. So I have a really good time with that. And then, epimedium is kind of another one of my rock star ground covers. So a really important matrix plant for me. I get, there's bees are using the nectar a lot, so I get a lot of activity there. But I have it in a lot of my dry, what else? I mean, it's one of the best for dry shade. So it does work really well. There's a ton of different ones you can get, anything in white and yellow, pink, purple, orange colors. I get the ones that are, I mean, most of mine are like semi-evergreen in my place. And so they look good until about January or February. That's when they'll brown. And then I just do a head shear thing, and the leaves stay. So I do not remove the leaves. They just go a head shear or a string trimmer, just kind of get it before the new growth comes out, which for me, the new growth usually starts right in the early part of March. So I just try to make sure somewhere in February, I just go ahead and whack it, leave the leaves where they stay, and then the new growth comes up through. So works out great. Wonderful plant. These are just a couple other ground covers I use. So I use Brunnera as a ground cover. The leaves are great. I mean, it's great that you have the nice blue flowers, but I just use it for the leaves. That's a hybrid, obviously columbine. I have the native red columbine scattered around, and then pulmonaria, which I also use as a ground cover for my moister areas. So I try to mix in some of those. Those are great plants that just do really well. And then I want to talk about, so this is where I do tulips. So this is the hell strip, right? So that's the strip between the sidewalk and the street. So I found that this is the one place I can reliably put tulips. And I can put them there because the animals, the rabbits and the deer get really skittish about being in that little strip. They're very exposed. People are walking by. There might be some cars. So they kind of leave it alone. If I put tulips anywhere else, they'll just eat them down. Now I treat these as annuals. So what I've done is, in my hell strip is I have so if I go from the west side of my property, it goes from the west side to my driveway is like one bed. There's no grass there. Then my driveway, then I have another bed, then I have about 4 to 6 feet of grass. And then I have another hell strip bed, the walkway that goes up to my front walk, the hell strip bed on the other side, about 10 feet of grass, and then the final. So I have 5 beds. So separated by 2 little patches of grass, really small. And so those are the 5. And so what I do usually is I do the 2 areas around my walkway that goes up to the front walk. Those beds I plant the same, symmetric. And then the other 3 beds, I do the same thing. So that's kind of what I've done. But I plant between 400 and 600 tulips. So I'll do that every year. And my goal is I do something different every year. So the tulips bloom, as soon as they're done blooming, they all get pulled. So they all go to compost. It's a 1-year thing. Most tulips only last a couple years anyway, except for species tulips. They never look as good as the first year blooms. I mean, they're bred to look great, right? I mean, that's what they do. They're bred to look awesome that first year. And then they kind of they're petering out as they go. So, so I do this. My neighbors everybody has to see, what am I going to do the next year? So these are just a couple different things. Now, in this case, I used a tulip and a daffodil on the left. I treated those as annuals because I need to clear these beds out anyway. But you can see these are just from a few different years of what I've done. So, I try to create this, and that gives me that really cool wow factor that's as people are walking down the street and, and people stopping by. And so I have a lot of fun doing that design. So that's what I do out there with the tulips. This is just one of my wow plants. I mean, this is just Deutzia Chardonnay pearls. It's just a workhorse plant. I don't do a lot of plants that just have one season interest, and this is obviously one of them. Other than that, it's kind of like, but this is actually viewed from my back neighbor's yard. My yard's to the left, so this is the bed on the back. So he actually gets to see it better than I can. But it's just the way the sun happens to sit. Now I cut out about 1/5 of the stems every year because it flowers so much better to keep it rejuvenated. This plant just looks, but that's what it looks like every spring. It's such an awesome wow plant. Packera aurea. If anyone doesn't, I mean, I just love this native. It's a fabulous ground cover. And I know it's supposed to be for moist shade, but this area that you're looking at is underneath a birch tree. And that birch is mature and is sucking up every little bit of moisture, but that Pacora has done really well there. It does great in the moist areas. That's what it really loves. But it'll do great. And, besides having the great yellow flower in May, it's a beautiful evergreen ground cover. I mean, it looks great the whole year, holds through the winter really well. So I love that one. I also like it you can see that blue hosta behind it, and even that blue pottery ball behind that. I mean, I think that combination just really kind of looks great with the yellow. I mean, that really just catches the eye. So that's part of trying to create those vignettes. This is double filed viburnum summer snowflake. This is about 20 years old, so it's about 15 feet tall and 8 feet wide, but that's it in bloom. It's just, that's in May. Just incredible wow plant. I mentioned creating vignettes, so sometimes they don't have to be around plants. They can be around nice containers that you find. I probably have about 50 containers that I have out at any one time. About half of them are potted and the other half are not. So they form a lot of different vignettes for me. And I try to create that, some different kind of looks. So, I mean, here's just the nice thing about using, we talked about foliage before flowers. So it's great to have a lot of texture. So I have a lot of fun there. So and pots are easier to move than plants sometimes. Then allium, that purple sensation, just earliest blooming allium. I mean, I can't do without this. I mean, it naturalizes like crazy. So it's always, you can always have plenty. I mean, it's great to move them around, but they're great tuck-in plants, and they keep that architectural, I can put them in anywhere, and it keeps that nice look. And they even look great when they've browned. So they look super. So I think it's an important part to kind of get us through that as we're now into May. And then Allium schubertii. I mean, if this is the allium that every person in the world stops and always like, what is that thing? So I always love it. I mean, you guys, I'm sure a lot of you grow it. It's just so much fun. It just looks like a big firecracker got put into it and blew it up. I have a lot of fun, and that looks great also through the whole summer as well. Then I'll use some bog gardens. I put them in places where they're going to be obvious. So I have one on my driveway when people come in. I actually have a couple on the driveway, and then one on the walk coming up to the front. Kids love to feed the Venus flytraps, except for the honeydew, the sundews, except for the sundews that are in there. They come in, but the rest of them stay. So all of these plants are outside all year. So these containers go and get tucked in one little spot by my house, but they're outside. They're a little bit protected by the house, which gives them a little microclimate, but they do great. I've had them out for years and years, so they do not come in. And they look great. So it's just fun. Kids love it. Again, I mentioned the importance of creating, if you're going to have a 4-season garden, you got to have vignettes. So, just continue to think about, like I said, I always go, what's in bloom, what's catching my eye, and how can I enhance that combination? Because I can't do that for the whole, but because everything doesn't bloom at once. So it's like, but I want, okay, here's the vignette, and this might be the vignette, on May 15th, and on May 30th, the vignette moves somewhere else, and the vignette moves somewhere else. But I want everybody to have a kind of, there should always be a wow experience. And you can do it with a lot of fun things, and some stuff you can move around, like having that watering can kind of really added to that little vignette. This is just a little shady spot, gets a few hours of sun. So obviously you've got the Virginia sweetspire. That's Japanese umbrella pine, Ceadopus. Yeah, I always say it wrong. Ceadopodus verticillata. But the Japanese umbrella pine, the Hacknacloa, it's just a really nice combination. I love that kind of combination together with the geranium. And then just having that little tucked pottery ball just in the background, you just get a little sense of it. It just adds a lot to that picture. I mentioned that, so now you can start to see how I plant. Everything is in community of plants. I mean, my garden is all jam-packed with stuff. This is why I don't have to mulch. So this is lobelia, the syphilitica. So instead of the red cardinal flower, it's the blue one. Gorgeous. There's the pachyra on the lower right when it's not in bloom. So great, like I said, great ground cover. This is just a picture of my patio in the back. It's a few hours of sun, the rest of it's in shade. So I put some house plants, a few shrubs. There's the Japanese maple, bromeliads are there. It's kind of fun. And then that's just the path leading off my patio. I put this picture in just as a reminder that, even though when we have window boxes or containers, we should never forget to put perennials or, and things in there. I think they look the best when they're mixed with annuals. A lot of times I see everyone's trying to figure out what kind of annual display and then change some, obviously change things up. But I find the best ones are when I'm mixing perennials with some annuals. Penstemon digitalis, great drift. This is in my front yard. I'd love to have this plant, and I just have it in a number of places where I've created these really nice drifts of it. What's going to happen is when the penstemon eventually goes away and is out of bloom, then that whole area is filled with echinacea and rudbeckia. So we move from that transition where we get this, and then it goes from that nice kind of, violet color to eventually having a lot of, yellows and purples. And so it changes into that summer look in the same location. This is underneath that big Pinus parviflora that I showed you initially by the porch. So this is, again, I used the Lamian, that one's Pink Nancy. That's my ground cover in that particular area, and then just kind of have a number of different ferns and hostas, and just playing around again with the different shapes and textures. Sweet Bay Magnolia. Love this tree. Just a gorgeous tree. I mean, anything that, it's nice to have trees that bloom in June. You've got that nice lemon scent on the flower, and it's semi-evergreen for me. I know around here, you guys are probably a half a zone. I know around here, some are a half a zone ahead, better than me. But it definitely gets kind of semi-evergreen, but has some really nice color. It's just it's a great backdrop tree that I can do a lot of different vignettes with. And then Spigelia, I love adding Spigelia. Any place that's got a little bit of it's kind of like the edge of the woodland kind of plant, so it needs that organic woodsy type soil. But if it's got a little bit of moisture in there and it's very organic, it grows like it's just wonderful. And when it's not in bloom, the leaves are really dark, and I find that it's just a great plant to, again, using it as a matrix. And then hummingbirds are just all over this plant, obviously, just by the color. I mean, it's just so much fun watching the hummingbirds. So I use this plant a lot as another one of my matrix plants. And then Viburnum nudum, one of my favorite viburnums, native. You got great fall, great spring white flowers, around August, September, you got the great berries, and then that fabulous fall color. This one's Brandywine, which is great. I have like 5 of them scattered around the property. They're just such fabulous wow plants and give you that multi-season interest. I put this picture not because of the knockout rose that's been there forever, but again, just to show in the background, you can see the thuya that's sitting there in the blue pot. So it's, that's been there for 8 years growing in that pot. And so it's great to elevate plants where you don't expect them. So I like to use containers, elevate them, and put the containers in the midst of my borders and kind of bring that up. And I find that works great. I also, that pot got positioned a number of times because I paid a lot of attention to where there's 2 times, one around 10 o'clock in the morning and then around 5 o'clock in the evening in the summer. The sun hits that thuya just perfect, and it just glows like magic. So it's really pretty. So that pot's been shifted until I got the sunlight exactly perfect. So that's the other nice thing about having pots. This just shows a lot of what I try to do with, again, this is obviously mostly foliage. This in front of the shed, there's a lot of shade here. Just a lot of layering, just to show what I do. Very dense planting, everything kind of runs together. Little pops of color is all you need sometimes too. And it really kind of, but just having the yellows and the different colors of green is very appealing to me and helps to add that. This is a little pond I have right off the walkway coming up to the front door. So you have to walk right by it. The sidewalk is, I'm just standing right on the sidewalk here, going up to my front door. And it's just one of those little 65-gallon plastic tubs that you can get at, Lowe's and Home Depot. And I just sunk it in there, built around it. And I built a berm behind it so that I could let that Hackanachoa look like a waterfall coming down the berm. So it kind of spills itself around, and it just made it really adds to that water feature there. So that was kind of fun. This is kind of just part of my back garden. This is kind of a hidden area. It's actually only visible from one spot in the garden. So it's my little, if I want to kind of hide out, then I can hide out there. And it's always fun having my wife like, I have no idea where you are. And it's like, our property's not that big, but I can hide out there and she can't find me. Everybody has to have a spot like that. We're well into summer now, into some of the summer plantings. This is hydrangea prososea, which is one of my favorites. It's actually it's a cross between macrophyll and serrata. So it's got the cold hardy genes of serrata, but it's just gorgeous. It starts off with creamy yellow, goes to pink, goes to deep red, has red stems, and the leaves turn red in the fall. So, I mean, it's just like, it is like a gorgeous, gorgeous hydrangea. It's really hard. It's hard to find, but it's been one of my favorites. Annual sunflowers, I had to make sure I hit the railing rule. So I have some annuals that only go about 3 to 4 feet tall. And that works out good. That actually came out pretty nice. Below it, you can see, and the picture on the right is just Botanica. Well, it's now Botanica. It was Stakey's. That was Hamelo. I love having, and now it's been shifted to Botanica, just to keep us all guessing. But anyway, I just love the purple flowers. Of course, you've got that in early July, late June, early July, the nice spikes. Bees are all over Stakey's. It's not native, but I mean, there's like a gazillion pollinators that are on those plants. Those blooms are so pretty and they look great. The plant makes a fabulous ground cover as well. So it's another really good matrix plant. Now we're back to the hell strip. So remember, the tulips are all gone. So now we're going to change things out. And so I do have perennials in there, obviously, as you can see, and I even have a few shrubs. Amazingly, I cannot believe those Chamaecyparis that are in the picture on the right, because they get dumped on by that the snowplow comes through, and there's 5 feet of snow on top of those Chamaecyparis, but they have survived. I mean, they've been there for about 15 years. And they've done great, but I've also had really good luck with, I'll throw some daylilies there, but Virginia Sweetspire does great there. Nepeta does great there. Stakey's does great in the hell strip underneath the snow. So I've played around with increasing some of the perennials that are there, but also I keep areas that are still open where the tulips are going to all be replaced. So again, every year I try to come up with a different combination of something new. Just to challenge myself to do something different. But you can see, what I love is you can see the allium sphaerocephalon on the picture on the right. That's the drumstick allium. That is just, it's just gorgeous, right? It just pulls your eye right down along the entire sidewalk. It just looks fabulous and it stands out above all the other plantings. And that's another one that just bees are all over that plant for about 6 or 7 weeks. That allium draws more activity from bees than any of the other alliums, and all the alliums get a lot of bee activity, but those ones are just always covered. Again, just a few more of the hell strip. Sometimes I'll put that, I'll use that purple fountain grass. The sun also shines early morning along the hell strip, and then right before the sun sets, the hell strip gets lit up. So I kind of take advantage of that light, that low light that goes. Here's an early morning picture of the garden. This was this year, so I actually put some dahlias in there for this year, and then used just some of the annual orangey vincas and some lantana to kind of mix in with the yellow dahlias. So that was this year's hell strip. This is my pollinator garden. Remember where all those bulbs were. So now we're well into the summer. You can't see any of the bulb foliage, and things are starting to take off. That's right along my driveway, so I get to see that. So that pollinator garden forms the west side of my driveway to my neighbor's property and up to the front sidewalk. This is standing on my driveway looking the other way. So this is the bed in front of the garage. So now you saw it in the winter months. So now you can start to see what it starts to look like in the summer. So this is most of my front yard, it looks like. Again, it's just some combination. I love the Rudbeckia with the sedum. That's Pallas. That's Purple Emperor. And then that copper container that's aging, that's holding up the Pallas, the Purple Emperor. That one works. That combination works really good. A little drift of ageratum. I use ageratum a lot to just kind of pull the eye through some of my plantings. Again, we're into summer. This is a little path that goes from the driveway to my front walk. I mostly am the only one who uses it. Sometimes you can't find the path with the Rudbeckia, but it's actually, the picture makes it look tighter than it is, but the stones are set sort of diagonally to each other, and so you kind of walk around, and the Rudbeckia kind of fills in all the gaps. So there is actually a path there that can be walkable, but and then you can see the sidewalk. I've got that Joe Pye. So this is the sidewalk, and I like people to immerse themselves. You know, I'm on a small property. People love to walk by. Neighbors love to walk by. So I have areas where it's tall, where the Joe Pye is, and they feel they're immersed in the garden because I've got the hell strip planted as well. So they're kind of like, it's part of an experience, even as people walk by, and people have really appreciated that. And then there'll be different heights, and then it'll go down, and the views will open up. So even when they're on the sidewalk, they can't really see the whole garden, even though the front is lower than the rest of the garden. But I still have obstructed some of the views. So I've had good success with that. Just some other pictures in the front yard, just some of the combinations that I've put together. You know, so I'm always looking and moving. I have moved so many plants and never all of you, I'm sure everyone's the same, don't hesitate to move plants, right? That's what they're there for. I mean, find the combinations. I mean, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Don't tolerate it if it doesn't work. You can have beautiful plants. You can have plants that are great for native, that are great for pollinators, and you can have all these great native plants, and you can still make the whole thing look beautiful too. So you just have to play around and edit. I have just a lot of fun with that part of it. This is a combination I love when it's all in bloom. So this is on the other side of that. That's that Joe Pye you saw from the sidewalk. This is the other side of it. So you've got, that's hydrangea, that's paniculata, that's bobo, which I think is one of the nicest small paniculata hydrangeas. I mean, look how many blooms are on that thing. I mean, it's just gorgeous. And then clethras to the left. So the three of them all bloom at the same time, and it's just gorgeous. That's hydrangea crucifolia. That's little honey. I love the little honey. Oak leaf hydrangea, that one's beautiful. It's got that great yellow foliage with nice panicles. Then you get the beautiful fall foliage and the exfoliating bark. This is the later summer. Just tucking in that, just creating that vignette with that pot in there, just to kind of add. I mean, I think that to me looks, I really like that particular combination there. Here I had the sambucus, that's black lace in bloom, and I wanted to accentuate that. So after doing a little research, I found that Allium nigrum blooms at the exact same time. So I put the Allium nigrum in the hell strip to mimic the blooms on the sambucus. So it kind of echoes that little spot and to create that little bit of a wow factor. Here's, again, I'm standing on my sidewalk going up to my front walk. So I'm not far from the front door, just kind of looking at the garage border. You can see layering. I mean, I went through a phase where I quickly learned that I had too many. I remember early in my process, I had too many plants that were the same height. And I realized, oh, that was really wrong. And so I quickly learned from that. And then I've learned now to really stagger everything and these ups and downs and making sure that I've got exclamation points as well as working with different foliage. Here's just a pop of color. This is that same area around my shed. Remember, it was kind of a very shady area. The astilbe was in bloom. Now the astilbe's out of bloom. And I just have this one echinacea that I just keep right there, just to create a little pop again. So now we have that astilbe pop of color. Then all of a sudden we get the echinacea, and I have a little bit of sunlight that hits one little spot, and then I have a sedum that eventually does it. So this very shady area has just enough light to support kind of 3 different little pops of color. And so it just kind of adds a little bit of something to that. Here's the pond, only looking at it from a different way. I put this picture in just to, again, you can see the density of my plantings, but there's, what I'd like to do too, is there's a container behind that euphorbia up on the upper right part of the picture. And you can see there's a hosta and a carex and a euchera in there. And what's cool is you can't see the container at all. It's completely embedded in the plants, but it gives you those views of those plants from different sides. You're not used to seeing the carex spilling down from that height. And so it just kind of adds, again, it adds that little bit of extra to this kind of like this setting. So just a little shady area using some pulmonaria around the bird bath. Once I found that pot, I had to find something that was yellow that would go with that pot, that would go well. So I put that together, found that crocosmia. That one's Welverton yellow. And then there's a caramel euchera behind it. And I just have a little marigold that has that yellow. So I created that vignette around that container. So the container drove that design. Here's just another container that I think looks great. So this is what I love to do to create that 4-season garden, is keep thinking about little spots to have these vignettes that will pop out. So here's my front. Again, we're getting near the end of summer. So this is kind of my porch border to the left. The porches, that wraparound porches to the left. I have a little bit of a path that goes up and connects to the walkway that goes to, so my front door is kind of up to the left back there. So it's all shady from the stones to the left, and it's in full sun from the stones to the right. But you can see I've done some berms, which is a big part of what I've done through my property. My property is on a very slight slope going down the street. It's not that. So I've created a whole series of different berms just in different spots to create a little bit more of having plants kind of spilling down. And again, you can see how densely everything gets planted. Yeah, here's that. So now I'm standing, I'm on the driveway and the sidewalk, right where the driveway and the sidewalk, and looking across my front borders. Now we're obviously late in summer here. Yeah, this is, I think this picture is it actually might be August, early August, late July. So I've got lots of color. So I've tried at least use the white to kind of work my way down through to kind of pull your eye through to make it not look quite so chaotic. But so then we hit autumn, time to switch out containers. So it's time to, throw some other things in, get back, buy some more plants, get to the garden store, find some more ways to throw some other things, refresh some containers. Obviously, I love having anemones also in the ground. I even love their seed heads. They just look awesome. So I love having some anemones. And then of course, dahlias are spectacular in September. As we get into fall, they put that last incredible growth out and just look super. So it's always fun to have some dahlias around. This was just container, that little bird cage I found, I actually found one. I painted it yellow because I thought that would look good against, I knew I was going to put it near that hosta. So I thought, oh, I'll just paint that bird cage yellow. And I've had this for a number of years. And then I played around with a whole bunch of different plants in there. And but last year I stumbled on just putting that spider plant in there, and it was like a common plant, but actually it's turned out to be my favorite of the things I've done, because it just looks cool escaping through all the holes in the bird cage, and it just looks like it's this fluttering of activity, and it looks great against the hosta below it. So that combo went well. I also use a lot of papyrus in containers if I'm going to use as a thriller. I find that it's a really great place to put it, and that's always the middle one. So that's like Prince Tut. That one seems to work the best for containers, and obviously then I can control the amount of water that I'm putting into it, and it does really well. So I mentioned, this is a little fall vignette. There's that blue container with that thuya. So this is my fall vignette. In the spring, I have a vignette on the other side of the container. So as I mentioned, you've got to keep going, try to create these vignettes and have them pop up. So every time I try to, instead of spreading out all my color blooming at the same time, I'm trying to like, okay, I'm going to really get this spot. And then, 2 weeks later, that spot might be really cool. So, and it keeps that interest going. So that's worked out really well for me. This is just an area I never see. I'm standing on my other neighbor's property. So there's my shed. So my house is on the other side. I never come over here except when I'm talking to my neighbor. So this is just a no care, what I wanted. Like, I never will see this bed. It gets no watering, gets no care. It just sort of is there. But I still wanted to have, obviously, a lot of ground cover, just do things. So there's some Solomon seal in there. Obviously a lot of epimedium, some ferns. You've got that Kuza, some hostas, things I don't even have to, it's just a nice place. It's kind of out of the way, does its thing. It's Chelone. That's one of the purple cultivars. I have the white native one too. Great for humming. It's another great hummingbird plant. So the hummingbirds that are still coming around are still coming over for that particular plant. And then just have fun, right, with some fall things. One of the things I like to do is I found a bunch of clay pots that are like 10.5 inches wide. And they're perfect because at the end of the year, when, nurseries, if they're just got some annuals on sale or some stuff, they're usually in 10-inch pots, those little 10-inch things. So I just take them, and I'm not going to waste, it's, usually now I'm talking about September, and I'm not going to waste any more potting soil. So I just take them and throw them in the clay pots. I just leave the container, leave it in there, just toss it in there and just leave it in there. They're going to eventually go to compost anyway. And then even if I buy some like that sedum, which I bought, I just threw in there, and then I went ahead and planted it when I was done with that combination. So it's nice to just have a bunch of different containers. And then I'll take little stands, and again, I'll put the containers on different stands in the garden to create different heights and things. So I just have a bunch of little things that I can do that. So it's fun to just kind of play around, but those 10.5-inch clay pots look great because everything goes in it really well. This is that little shady area in my front yard. Again, just showing you kind of the controlling views. At no point does anybody ever get to really see my entire garden. And it helps to make it look a little bit bigger. And I just love a lot of the textures that are in there. This is standing on my neighbor's property looking at the back of my property. So this is the back west, the southwest corner. And I'm standing on their grass. So, and looking down at the back of my property. So this is their view of my property. So I just thought I'd put that in. That's that Calocarpus on the right, that really stands out. That's duet. So it has a white berry. The birds all eat the white berries, so it still has some value there. But the white berries, I mean, you'll never see them. I don't grow them for the berries. It's just that foliage is so awesome. I mean, that plant just shines through the summer and through the fall. It's just a great plant to have. I mean, I love that one. And then what I did is I had a large Chamaecyparis in the bed that's to the left of that Calocarpus. And it was right in that corner, like facing us. And so I removed it last year. It was just, I realized it was, after doing pictures, it was like, okay, it messed up the heights. Nothing looked right. It just looked wrong. So I cut that down, and now it looks better. The trees that are there just look like they're the right proportions. And I've added areas now that's a nice sunny area. So I'm putting a lot more natives in there. So that whole area's got to sort of start coming back. But that's the view my one neighbor gets. And then this is along the sidewalk. I know a lot of people hate Liriope, but you know, along a sidewalk where the dogs pee on it and the kids ride things and run over it. I mean, that plant just holds up through anything. I mean, it can get peed on by the dogs, everything. It's just that thing just, yeah. So I kind of like it as an edging along the sidewalk because it's such a tough plant. And it actually looks really good when that Rudbeckia is in bloom. That combination really comes out really well. So I do like it there. And then of course, you know, the big three, make sure that, you know, as we think about it's fall, so we want to make sure we're taking care of our pollinators. So we certainly want the upper left one is the willow leaf sunflower, Helianthus salicifolius. And that one blooms in October, and it's just like spectacular. It's not like what you would think of other sunflowers, and it's just like covered in small, flowers, and just, the pollinators are all over it. It's just a spectacular, just catches your eye, and it stands out the most. And you can see I've got the little Swiss chard in front. I always throw different vegetables mixed in with my beds too. And then of course, some solidago and asters. That's the dinosaur kale, which is a fabulous kale. First of all, it's really tasty. If anyone doesn't ever, if people like aren't sure about kale or not a big kale person, this kale is like one of the best kales to eat. It's called the Tuscany kale. But it's got great texture. So I have it planted all around, and then I'll just, harvest it amongst my beds. It's also got the most amazing texture. It gets about 3 to 4 feet tall in the season. Fabulous plant to be a textural contrast with something else. And like I said, tastes great. Just an agave that's kind of helps pull that kind of riotous color combination together. Tricertus totally. The bumblebees are all over this. I know it's not native, but this is a great, because it's blooming in late October, and the bumblebees are all over this plant constantly before they're getting to their winter time. So it works great. It's such an exotic, and it's really delicate, and it's just fun to kind of tucked in there. I don't see it in too many people's gardens, but it's a fun one to have. It's good for shade. And then I only put this in here. Eurybia is on the bottom. So that's Eurybia divaricata, Eastern Star, the white wood aster. It's just a great ground cover. I use it all the time. Blooms late in the year. Great for pollinators. It's native. Just another fabulous one. This is that area where the Chamaecyparis got removed. So I'm just trying to let it. I just put a bunch of things in. I've got a bunch of natives in here, and I'm just sort of letting them duke it out for a little bit before I start editing. I just want to see kind of who wants to establish the best in there. That's last few pictures. This is just obviously a foggy day. So that was Nyssa is the tree that's on the left. And then on the right, there's a ginkgo that's been in that container for about 10 years. I keep pruning it. It's supposed to be like 15 feet tall. It's only like 3 feet tall. So I just keep whacking it, and it does great. And it just looks good in the container. So it's been living there for a while. And then the bottom right picture is Sedum cibolii, which I just love that particular sedum. That's like a late October, early November picture. And it's great to have it spill over walls. Or it just kind of layers on the top of brick, and it just softens them really well. So I have it like, where I've built up a little bit, and I've used some of the landscape bricks and things, and I have it spilled out there. But the foliage is really blue, and it just looks spectacular when it's in bloom. That's just one of the hydrangeas. That one's white diamonds. That's a paniculata. This is like a late September picture. Obviously, we're getting to the season change. Solomon seal on the left, and that Monarda punctata, which is a wonderful native. I love this Monarda. It blooms really late, and it looks like it's on layers. It looks like a cake with layers. And because it blooms so late and it doesn't get going until late, you hardly even notice it's in the garden until like we get to September and October. I just never get any mildew or mold on it. I mean, I don't get any powdery mildew. I think it's just because it's such a late in the season, but it's been a really great plant. It's clethra in its fall color. I love having clethra. Fothergilla, such a great, wow plant for the fall. So there's that on the left is that viburnum nudum. And again, this is what this came to be, I knew the viburnum nudum. I watched it go with beautiful leaf color at that time, and I just wanted to do something more. So I hunted around until I found that calico aster, and I realized that is an incredible combination. And I love that combination. The color of the calico aster mimicking the leaf color of the viburnum is it's just incredible. And the two textures, so they both kind of work really well together. And then I've got the ansomnia in the container. There's my maple. That one's kind of more grass that's up in the middle, and then just a few other leaves and Japanese maples. Hydrangea quercifolia. With its fall color, love oak leaf hydrangeas. They're so beautiful. That one's Snow Queen, one of my favorite. There's my November. This is my November ready for winter picture. So that's me. I've done all my garden cleanup, which is almost zero. So I just really kind of, other than pulling in succulents and trimming along the edges of the sidewalk, mostly things stay up. So the garden is now kind of ready to go. Again, just a few more pictures. There's that sidewalk that you couldn't see with the Rudbeckia. So there's that little walk. And you can see there's some hellebores now that are sticking out, just great ground cover plants. And it's always good to take pictures, because when I took the picture, the one on the right, I looked in the back and I realized there was an agave still sitting there. And it was like mid-November. I was like, oh, I missed it. So it just reminds me, so that one quickly got inside and is doing fine. But see, there's some extra benefit to take pictures of your property. You never know what you're going to miss until you start to see it see your photos. And then finally, these are just, so there's that, the black dragon, the cryptomeria. That's my view looking in my back, looking down along the one side. So that one kind of anchors that view. My patio is right to the left side. And then just a little bit on the patio. So, and then we're at Christmas, and my friends are going to hope you have happy holidays. So, anyway, I just want to also just throw this out there. Just my own little shameless thing. But remember, I'm doing the Tuesday at 10. And then I do a thing called Home Garden Series. So if anybody's interested, but that's the slide. I know this is being recorded, so it's easy to get that. Underneath the red is the 6 Home Garden Series, but you can ever look up Penn State Extension, Dauphin County, and you can find Home Garden Series. These are the ones I'm doing. The one in January is going to be on hydrangeas, so that's on January 14th. These are all webinars, so easy to get on and participate if you're interested, or if you like what you're seeing or what I'm doing. So that's that. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for sitting through this tour of my garden. I went 10 minutes longer than I thought. Okay, so sorry that I went over a little, but I could have easily gone 2 hours over. So I felt like I really helped you guys out. I shortened it as the best I could, but so I hope that provided a little bit of inspiration. I have fun being out in the garden. I know you guys do. So I can do anything. Any questions? Because I can do some. Yeah. 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 Oh, they will. They'll grow right up through the epimedium without any trouble. They'll work their way up there without any problems. I mean, the epimediums are pretty, they of course create that really tight. But the tulips, I've had them grow up through epimediums without any problems. I mean, if you had a little bit of an issue, if the epimediums are so dense, you could always like cut out a little bit. But I've had no problems with bulbs coming up through epimediums, so I don't think you'll have any trouble.
What's your source for your bulbs and the pots that withstand pumps?
Yeah, so my bulbs are mostly from Brent and Becky's, who I've kind of gotten a fan of over the years. The quality has always been good. I've used other bulb companies as well, and there are other really good ones. So I don't want to say that that's the only one that's out there. I just, it's like you find something that works, that's reliable, and so I went with Brent and Becky's, and have pretty much done everything from them. As far as the pots are just a constant search. You just, I mean, I live to go to garden centers and flea markets, and I mean, just looking for places to find containers. It's just, if I can, and so they're just scattered. They're just finds. I have not found any one spot that has been great. And then I'll do, if I spend under $100 in a pot or under $150, I'm okay with leaving that. I'll take a chance on that. And, sometimes, you buy one of these, you get some pot, and like, there's a couple there that, I mean, I might've spent like $700 on. And it's like, well, those don't stay out. I will tell you, I don't care even if they say they're, and they don't get planted. Because there's no way I'm going to put a plant in a pot that I spent that much money for. They go in the shed, they get all babied. But if I'm going to spend less money, I don't mind. But I've had really good success, with any pottery, especially ones that come from, some of the ones that come from Vietnam. I don't know, they use some other kind of clay, because those things I've got some containers that I have had out for almost 20 years. And when I flip them over and look, it always said like made in Vietnam or something. It was like, I don't know what kind of clay they're using, but it was amazing. I mean, some of these pots have just stayed outside all the time, and there's plants in them, and they still do great. And but they're heavy as all, the really good ones, of course, are backbreaking to move, but it's good to have a little lift or some kind of thing that kind of move them around if you need it. So I try to get as much as I can. I will stack them. Some I'll leave in the garden areas out. And then some that I want, especially if I've got them planted, I tuck them along the house a little bit, because it does create that nice microclimate. And then I have one really nice place where all the vents for all the heater and all that vents out one side. That's a great place for if I've got some, I'm 6B, if I've got plants that are in a container that are like zone 6 or even 6B or zone 7, I can overwinter them outside there in a container and just kind of slip them up, because the heat from the stuff just comes in. So it's enough. Yes.
Your papyrus, you grow them in soil or the water?
I actually grow them in soil. I mean, I'll grow them in water too. I'll put them in the ponds, but I grow them in soil. I just use I've gone to just a peat-free soil mix that's worked out really well. I will in plants that are like those, I'll add vermiculite, because vermiculite holds water. So remember, so perlite is for aeration and vermiculite holds water, right? So think of those two. So when I make up my mix, so I have my mix, and then I just custom my mix, and then and then for all my succulents, I'll use I have my same basic mix. I have my potting soil, but then I've got poultry grit, and then I'll mix that with poultry grit and make it really, really gritty and things. So it's helpful to mix your own, but yeah, vermiculite and potting soil works fine, and they do great. I've had no trouble with that.
It seems to me that your wife has a in-house gardener. It looks to me as if you must have done some research before you moved into the house, because I don't know whether you've gone along with taking courses there or just done extensive research on your own. But you're definitely not a beginner when it comes to the quality that you've chosen.
Thank you.
So, how did this come about?
You know, it's
Internet?
it's my lifelong pursuit of and I think being a physician also, I mean, I've always loved reading and learning and learning and learning. And so that spilled into this big hobby of mine. And so, yes, I mean, spending time, you know, every garden I could get to, you know, looking at taking, you know, photography has helped so much, taking photographs, re-looking at those pictures, looking at what worked, what didn't work, looking things up. Yeah, the internet has made life really easy to get a lot of research and things, but then talking to people and talking to gardeners and going over to Chanticleer or something and talking to some of the gardeners there. I've learned from a lot that way. I haven't done that. I just haven't had time to do true courses. Now it's easier now. I mean, you know, the pandemic has been horrible, but the best thing that came out of the pandemic is everything going on the internet and doing webinars, because and having them recorded, because I mean, that was the thing that kept me from doing a lot of stuff. Now it's like, now I see something interesting, I'll sign up, because who cares what day it is, right? I don't even have to look at my schedule anymore. It's going to be recorded. So it's like fabulous. It's like, if it's, you know, works. So I'm finding myself, you know, getting more and more interesting topics and learning that way. But I love to read. But I love, most of it though is, you know, yes, I do some research, but a lot of it is, I think once you get to a point, then it's a matter of, you know, just, you kind of have that base knowledge that you can start to look at how plants, you can just see them and see how they're going to probably grow and what they're going to do. And then not to be afraid to experiment and move things. My plants have moved so many times. I always say it's a dance, you know, and the worst thing is, you know, you go to a nursery and you find something else that you love and you come home. And of course, you know, I find one thing and then it's like my whole car is filled with things. And then I look at the garden and I have no idea where I'm going with this, right? And so I am not one of those who like made a design, you know, so I am the worst about that. So I was always like the seat of my pants, and it came from my love of photography. I think gave me a little bit of an eye for some of this, but I didn't mind moving things. So things get moved a lot, and until they kind of, and then they sort of settle in. So it's just get in there and have fun with it. Anyway, thank you all very much.
With everyone who's going to be here with us, we have reception outside. We
Cool.
look at our books.